The escalating war between 50 Cent and T.I.'s has officially crossed into dangerous territory, pulling in family members and threatening to resurrect old legal battles that many thought were buried for good. Now, with 50 Cent dangling the threat of a full-blown documentary over the Atlanta rap royalty, the internet is absolutely on fire. At the center of it all stands King Harris, T.I.'s and Tiny's son, caught in the crossfire of a feud that is far bigger than any diss track. But to truly understand how things reached this boiling point, you have to go back to where the tension first cracked open again, and that is Versus. The legendary battle series was built on the premise of celebrating hip-hop legacies, not igniting new wars. Yet ironically, it became the spark that reignited one of rap's most complicated rivalries. During the COVID-19 pandemic, T.I. repeatedly extended an invitation to 50 Cent for a Versus showdown, but the G-Unit mogul barely acknowledged the gesture, brushing off Tip's calls like they were background noise. Fast forward to 2026, and the conversation resurfaced in a major way when T.I. sat down on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast in February and finally gave the public the full picture behind that failed matchup. According to T.I., this was never a cold call situation. He made it crystal clear that he and 50 Cent had private conversations about the Versus long before anything was said publicly. The two were reportedly moving through Hollywood together, locking in television and film deals, and somewhere in those meetings, T.I. says 50 expressed genuine interest in doing the battle. Behind closed doors, everything seemed aligned. But the moment T.I. went public with it, 50 flipped the script entirely, acting as though the conversation had never taken place. That betrayal of private agreement is what cost 50 Cent T.I.'s respect and what lit the fuse on everything that followed. T.I. did not mince words when he laid out his version of events on $1 Million Worth of Game. He described a situation where two men reached a mutual understanding in private, only for one of them to completely abandon that understanding the second it became public knowledge. According to Tip, he and 50 were traveling together in Los Angeles, working on joint entertainment ventures, and the Versus conversation came up organically. They discussed it, they agreed, and T.I. was the one tasked with announcing it to the world. But when he did, 50 acted confused, like none of it had ever happened. That moment of public denial is what T.I. says turned a manageable disagreement into a full-scale war. For a man who carries the title of King of the South with the kind of pride T.I. does, being made to look like a liar in front of the entire hip-hop community was not something he was going to let slide. The feeling of being played, of having a private agreement weaponized against him, hit differently. And the truth is, this was not the first time these two have had issues. Their friction stretches back to the early to mid-2000s when 50 Cent dropped implications on Wax that T.I. was a government informant. That allegation, however subtle it may have seemed at the time, planted a seed of animosity between them that never truly went away. What the Versus situation really did was rip open a wound that had been poorly bandaged for nearly 2 decades. The two rappers had seemingly moved past their differences at some point, coexisting in the same industry without going to war. There were occasional jabs in interviews, the occasional slick lyric, but nothing that escalated into outright hostility. That all changed when T.I.'s public statement about the Versus put 50 Cent on the spot, and instead of handling it with maturity, 50 reached for his most reliable weapon. He did not head to the recording studio. He opened Instagram, and from there, the gloves came off entirely. What started as a dispute over a canceled rap battle quickly morphed into something far more personal and far more volatile once 50 Cent decided that T.I. alone was not enough of a target. He turned his attention to Tamika "Tiny" Harris, T.I.'s wife and beloved R&B artist, dragging her into a conflict she had no direct involvement in. And that decision changed the entire temperature of the situation. The moment Tiny was brought into the equation, the Harris children were no longer willing to watch from the sidelines. T.I.'s sons stepped forward, and what followed was a level of family involvement that transformed a rap beef into something that felt deeply, uncomfortably real. T.I., for his part, did go to the booth. He came out swinging with a string of diss tracks, releasing records including War in the Right One, pouring everything he had into the music while 50 Cent responded not with verses but with memes, unflattering photos, and the kind of social media trolling that has become his signature move. By March 3rd, T.I. had already appeared on the Ebro Laura Rosenberg show to break down the beef in detail, including the part that clearly weighed on him most, his children getting involved. As a lyricist, T.I. was winning the battle uncontested. As a father, the situation was getting out of his control. Enter King Harris. Born to T.I. and Tiny, King grew up as a familiar and beloved figure to fans of the family's reality television series. From the time he was a small child, viewers watched him bounce across their screens with an infectious energy, a sharp wit, and a magnetic personality that made him impossible to ignore. He was funny, fearless, and charismatic in a way that suggested a big future. But as the cameras kept rolling and King grew older, the headlines surrounding him began to take a darker turn. The same boldness that made him a fan favorite as a child evolved into something that began worrying the very people who had once rooted for him. By his teenage years, King was showing up in viral videos for all the wrong reasons. Heated confrontations with strangers, aggressive Instagram live sessions, and a constant need to assert himself as someone tougher and more dangerous than his privileged upbringing might suggest. Those close to the Harris family have described King as someone who desperately wanted to carve out an identity that was entirely his own, separate from his father's legendary status. He did not want to be T.I.'s son. He wanted to be King Harris, and chasing that distinction came with consequences. The public incidents involving King Harris began stacking up long before the 50 Cent beef ever entered the picture. In September 2022, he found himself in the spotlight for a verbal confrontation at an Atlanta Waffle House, a moment that was captured on video and spread rapidly across social media. T.I. and Tiny addressed it publicly, standing by their son while also acknowledging the unique difficulty of raising a child whose every misstep gets broadcast to millions. It was an early warning sign, and as it turned out, it was far from the last one. By November 2023, King was once again making headlines, this time for a live-streamed argument with his own parents during an Atlanta Falcons game event. In a moment that stunned fans, King went on Instagram Live and declared that he had been raised primarily by his grandmother, rather than in the kind of luxury his parents' fame implied. T.I. and Tiny pushed back in real time, disputing his claims while the entire internet watched a family work through its deepest tensions in the most public way imaginable. It was raw, uncomfortable, and painfully transparent. A glimpse into the pressure cooker that King Harris had been living inside of for most of his life. So when 50 Cent began posting unflattering images of Tiny on Instagram with captions like, "I keep saying, keep my name out your mouth," and then followed that up with photos of King alongside his mother with the words, "God don't like ugly," King's response was swift and without restraint. He jumped onto Instagram and said things that stopped the internet cold. In a moment that shocked even those who had been following the beef closely, King directly referenced 50 Cent's mother, who tragically passed away when 50 was just 8 years old. He told 50 to dig her up. There was nothing metaphorical about it. It was direct, it was raw, and it sent shockwaves across every platform. King did not stop there. He took the provocations a step further by releasing his own song and video, appearing in a t-shirt bearing the image of 50 Cent's late mother. Rick Ross, who has his own storied history of conflict with 50, immediately jumped into the comments to express his enthusiastic approval, writing that he needed a t-shirt in both dad size and a 3X for himself. The collaboration between Rick Ross and King Harris in this moment said everything about how layered and interconnected these rap rivalries truly are. And while the streets may have applauded King's aggression, on it, his own father was quietly drawing a line. T.I. had not wanted his children involved in this fight. He certainly had not wanted a deceased woman's memory dragged into it, but by the time he spoke up, the damage was already done.
What began as a dispute between two rap veterans has evolved into something unmistakably generational. This is no longer just 50 Cent versus T.I. This is about bloodlines, legacies, and the weight that children carry when their parents are icons. King Harris was already navigating a complicated personal story well before any of this started, and his legal history adds another layer of context to everything that is currently unfolding. King's first brush with the law came in August 2022, when he announced his own arrest on social media, posting his mugshot, and then taking to Instagram to offer his perspective on what had happened. The arrest had stemmed from what many initially dismissed as a minor traffic stop for not wearing a seatbelt, but the details that emerged told a more complicated story. The online reaction was merciless. Many people saw a young man born into extraordinary wealth and privilege who appeared to be making deliberate choices to court danger. T.I. did not sugarcoat his response. During an Instagram live, he told his son plainly that if he kept moving the way he was moving, prison was the inevitable destination, and that there would be nothing T.I. could do to stop it. The legal trouble deepened significantly when King was formally charged with speeding, knowingly operating a vehicle on a suspended license, and driving under the influence of drugs. Then, in September 2024, an arraignment notice was issued alongside a bench warrant after King failed to appear in court. That failure to appear warrant would come back to haunt him. In October 2024, during a routine stop in Dunwoody, Georgia, after King nearly collided with a patrol vehicle while pulling out of a gas station. Officers smelled marijuana coming from the car and discovered King was carrying a firearm on his hip. When they ran his information, the 2022 warrant came up immediately. The arresting officer documented the interaction in detail, noting that King was cooperative throughout. He was handcuffed, patted down, placed into a patrol vehicle, and transported to DeKalb County Jail without incident. But cooperative or not, the arrest was real, the warrant was real, and the pattern was becoming impossible for anyone to ignore. This was not an isolated incident. This was a young man with a recurring relationship with law enforcement, and the timing could not have been more complicated. By the time the October 2024 arrest occurred, King Harris had already been taken into custody before, including a January 2023 incident in which he was booked on 4 charges after refusing to comply with a police request for a blood test. The arrests were piling up, and the warrants were following close behind. All of this was unfolding against the backdrop of what should have been one of the most joyful chapters of King's young life. In November 2024, just weeks after his latest arrest, King welcomed a son into the world with the mother of his child. He even released a heartfelt track called Dear Son, a dedication to his newborn boy that offered a glimpse of a more tender, introspective side of the young artist. King had been building a music career under the stage name Kid Scion since 2020, experimenting with trap and melodic hip-hop, releasing early singles and following up with an EP in 2021 that marked his official transition from reality television personality to recording artist in his own right. There were signs of real potential there, but the personal headlines kept drowning out the musical ones. T.I. tried to intervene at multiple points, most notably in a viral confrontation that was captured on video during a music video shoot, where King was seen waving a firearm. T.I. stepped in directly, telling his son that regardless of legality, the way he was portraying that lifestyle did not look legitimate and would carry consequences. T.I. knew the road his son was flirting with better than almost anyone. He had walked it himself, and the scars from that journey were well documented. Which brings the conversation to T.I.'s own past with the legal system, a history that 50 Cent has now placed squarely back under the spotlight. T.I.'s first significant run-in with the law came in 1998 when he was arrested and convicted in Georgia on charges of cocaine distribution, manufacturing and distributing a controlled substance, and providing a false name to authorities. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. It was a defining early chapter, and one that T.I. has spoken about candidly as a period that shaped his hunger to build something lasting through music. He served his time, rebuilt himself, and climbed to the top of the rap game. But in 2007, just as his career had reached its commercial peak, everything collapsed again. On October 13th, for hours before he was set to attend the BET Hip Hop Awards in Atlanta, federal agents arrested T.I. in what turned out to be a sting operation involving one of his own bodyguards. The charges against T.I. in 2007 were serious on every level. He faced 2 felony counts, possession of 3 unregistered machine guns and 2 silencers, and possession of firearms as a convicted felon. Prosecutors revealed that T.I. had provided his bodyguard, who had been working as a federal informant, with $12,000 to purchase those weapons on his behalf. Each count in his 3-count indictment carried a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine, meaning T.I. was looking at the very real possibility of spending a significant portion of his life behind bars. What happened next is what 50 Cent has been pointing to ever since. T.I. entered a plea deal and was ultimately sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in prison, along with a $1,300 fine. For 50 Cent, the arithmetic simply did not add up. The gap between the maximum exposure of a decade behind bars and the reality of a single year served was, in 50's view, a number that only made sense if cooperation with the government was factored into the equation. He publicly labeled T.I. a snitch, and that accusation became the defining undercurrent of their relationship for years to come. T.I. has consistently denied the snitch label. His legal team pointed to more than 100 letters submitted on his behalf from public figures and community leaders, including a letter from Georgia Supreme Court Chief Justice Leah Ward Sears, who praised T.I.'s community service work with at-risk youth following his arrest. His supporters argued that an unusual but legally legitimate plea deal combined with genuine community contributions, could explain the reduced sentence without any cooperation ever having taken place. But in certain corners of hip-hop, the label stuck, and 50 Cent has never let it go that T.I.'s legal story did not end there. In September 2010, he was arrested again in Los Angeles after authorities reported finding 4 ecstasy pills in his possession during a traffic stop. By October that year, he had been sentenced to 11 months in prison for violating the terms of his probation, a violation that included the drug possession, a positive test for opiates, and associating with a convicted felon. 2 prison stints, 2 separate eras of consequence, and all of it sitting in the public record, ready to be revisited by anyone with a platform and motive. That brings us to the allegations that surfaced in 2021, when multiple women and one man came forward with claims against both T.I. and Tiny, accusing the couple of drugging, intimidating, and in some cases sexually assaulting them across incidents in California and Georgia. T.I. and Tiny have denied each of those allegations completely and repeatedly. Several of the associated lawsuits have since been dismissed. But 50 Cent is now suggesting that those claims deserve a documentary platform, and the announcement came with all the theatricality you would expect from someone who has turned stirring controversy into an art-formed INA post that immediately sent social media into overdrive. 50 Cent announced he was developing a documentary titled Surviving T.I. and Tiny. He accompanied the announcement with a pointed message directed at the Atlanta couple, advising them to seek crisis public relations help immediately. He drew a direct parallel to his work on the Netflix docuseries about Sean Combs, writing that he hoped T.I.'s promotional commitments would not be derailed by questions about the 20 sexual assault cases hovering over the couple's name. The message was unmistakable. 50 Cent was not throwing verbal punches anymore. He was threatening to bring cameras. T.I. fired back without hesitation. In a new track responding to everything 50 had thrown at him, he challenged his rival across every dimension, writing that they could go bar for bar, hit for hit, or documentary for documentary. He was not going to concede any ground. Speaking to TMZ around the same time, T.I. delivered a line that summed up his position with unexpected clarity, telling reporters that he was never there to defeat anyone. He was there to defend his family. That distinction mattered to him, and he made sure the world understood it. Meanwhile, 50 Cent has made his own position equally clear. He is not returning to the recording booth. He is not interested in trading verses with anyone. His battlefield is entirely different, and in many ways, far more dangerous. He operates as a media executive, a producer, a storyteller with distribution deals, and streaming partnerships behind him. When 50 Cent decides to pursue someone publicly, he does not need a microphone. He needs a camera crew and a platform, and he has both. He proved what that combination could do with his work on the docuseries, centered on Diddy's abuse allegations, a project that arrived at the end of 2025 and fundamentally altered public perception of one of music's most powerful figures in ways that no amount of social media posting ever could have accomplished. Now 50 is signaling that the Harris family could be next in his crosshairs. And for T.I. and Tiny, who have already fought through years of public allegations and legal battles, the prospect of those stories being packaged, structured, and presented to a global streaming audience is a threat of an entirely different magnitude than anything that happens on Instagram. Public opinion, as the Diddy situation demonstrated, can move swiftly and devastatingly when the right narrative is constructed around the right footage. 50 Cent understands that dynamic better than almost anyone in the entertainment industry, and he is gambling that what could not be settled in the courtroom might still be decided in the court of public opinion. For King Harris, who is only 21 years old, who just became a father, and who is currently carrying open warrants, arrest records, and the fallout from invoking a dead woman's memory in a rap beef, this situation has grown into something almost incomprehensibly large. He jumped into a conflict to defend his mother, which anyone who loves their family would understand. But the man he jumped into that conflict with does not fight like a peer. He fights like a media empire. And King is now caught between his own legal instability and the looming shadow of a documentary that could reshape his parents' public legacy permanently. The story of King Harris is many things at once: a celebrity cautionary tale, a portrait of inherited pressure, and a very human story about a young man trying to find himself in the blinding spotlight his famous parents built long before he ever had a say in the matter. T.I. saw the warning signs in his son long before any of this became public spectacle. He said as much, openly acknowledging that he recognized the energy King was carrying because he had carried the exact same energy himself at that age. He lived the recklessness. He served the time. And knowing exactly where that road ends is precisely why he's been so vocal about trying to redirect his son. T.I.'s own history with incarceration and legal consequences gives his warnings a weight that most fathers simply cannot summon. He is not speaking from theory. He is speaking from experience. And the urgency in his voice whenever he addresses King's choices makes that undeniably clear. The irony, of course, is that T.I. is now fighting to protect his family from a man who is using that very same history as ammunition. Every arrest, every conviction, every sentence reduced. 50 Cent has cataloged all of it, and he is prepared to present it in the most damaging format available to him. Whether the surviving T.I. and Tiny documentary actually materializes into a finished project remains an open question. 50 Cent deleted the post announcing it not long after it went up, which is entirely consistent with his documented pattern of posting something incendiary, watching the internet erupt, and then quietly removing the evidence. He provokes, he deletes, and then he monitors the wreckage. It is a method he has refined over years of public feuding, and it is remarkably effective at keeping in the conversation without requiring him to fully commit to any particular action. But even if the documentary never gets made, the threat alone has accomplished something significant. It has placed the allegations surrounding T.I. and Tiny back at the top of public conversation. It has reminded the industry of King Harris's legal troubles at the exact moment he is trying to establish himself as a serious artist and a new father. And it has demonstrated, once again, that when 50 Cent decides someone is his target, he has the resources, the patience, and the strategic intelligence to make that targeting feel genuinely threatening. The rap battle that T.I. wanted may never happen. The Verzuz that started all of this may remain forever unrealized. But the conflict between these two men has moved well past music at this point. It lives in courtrooms and documentary pitches and Instagram archives, and the very complicated private life of a 21-year-old named King Harris who wanted the world to know he was more than just his father's son. As of now, 50 Cent has confirmed nothing. T.I. has not stopped recording, and King Harris has not gone quiet. But something has fundamentally shifted in the dynamic between these families, and no one involved will be walking away from this unchanged. For the Harris family, the pressure is real, the stakes are higher than they have ever been, and the story, whatever form it ultimately takes, is far from over.